Hello, in this video we are going to be making this transparent thick liquid detergent. Can you see those traces? It shows you how thick this liquid detergent is. So it is actually thickened with salt, so it is not slippery like the normal DIY liquid detergent. And this is not just beautiful for nothing, it makes a very good lather. Before formulating anything, we sanitize our already washed utensils and we bring out our measuring scale. So now I want to dissolve the SLS because it takes some time. So at the beginning I put in some warm water to dissolve the SLS, and I just set that aside and continue with the rest of the formula. I'm going to come back to this later. So I always use cold water to dissolve, right? But it does take a long time, so I decided to see if warm water would work better. Welcome back to Radiant by J Naturals. On this channel we learn how to make easy to follow DIY skincare, hair care and home care products. Not the regular DIYs that don't perform optimally, but DIYs that you can use and you can sell and you would be satisfied with the results. Now, if you are new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe and join our community. And if you are a returning subscriber, you are highly welcome. Today, we are going to be making a liquid detergent that can be used for laundry, that can be used for doing dishes, for mopping the house, and general cleaning. Now, this liquid detergent we are going to make is not your regular DIY because it is not slimy. The slimy liquid detergents are better for products like body wash, like shampoo, but they are not very good for cleaning because when you add them to your water, they start becoming too viscous and you would not like, they won't give you that squeaky clean effect that you want on your floors or for your plates and all that. Now, I just want to give you a quick run through of what we are going to be using today. Now, one thing that I do that makes it easier for me is I write down my formula. I write down all the ingredients I need and I just have it handy on cards like this. So it makes me to keep track of what I've used because as I'm using, I'm ticking off the list. Now let us see the things that we are actually going to use. The first thing we are going to be using is water. Now, this is not all the water we are using. I'm just using this to show you. Now, you have to ensure that you have very clean water because the reason why most of your DIY projects become bad after a while is because you did not use very clean water. The ideal water to use for your project is distilled or deionized water because this ensures that your product stays good for longer and the fragrance doesn't fade off and the surfactants don't stop performing, because when you use normal water that has metal ions in it, they bind to the surfactants you have used, the preservative to work effectively. Okay, so that's water. And then I have not added water on this list yet. I just noticed that. Now we are going to be using SLS, which I have shown before. I have soaked it in hot water so that it gets dissolved before we start. Now we're also going to be using SLES. This is SLES and I have the 85% version. It is important for you to know what version of SLES you have. This SLES is also known as texapon. Don't mind the shea butter sticker. I just repurposed this jar. So we have our texapon gel. We are going to be using it and it is our primary surfactant. We are using it the most out of all the surfactants that we are using. SLES is a very good cleansing agent. It brings that cleansing power to your formula. Then we have another surfactant. This is LABSA. I like to call it LABSA. It is called linear alkyl benzene sulfonic acid, or popularly known as sulfonic acid. It is also an anionic surfactant and it brings very good cleansing properties to your formula. Then we are going to be using another surfactant. We are using Cocamidopropyl betaine. That's what I labeled as capb. So Cocamidopropyl betaine is an amphoteric surfactant. So what it does is that it brings some mildness into the formula. It also contributes to thickening and foam stabilization. Okay, so we are also going to be using another surfactant. So this surfactant is cdea. That's Coco. We are also going to be using ethanol. Ethanol brings this degreasing power into your formulation and it also helps to mix the fragrance, to make the fragrance mix well into the formula. Because this is a multi-purpose liquid soap, it means it would be used for washing dishes, for cleaning and other activities around the house, and that means that your hands would come in contact with this detergent. We want to make it to be mild on your hands. We want to make sure that it does not dry out your hands while using it, and that's why we are going to be using glycerin in this formula. The next ingredient we have here is Tetrasodium EDTA. Tetrasodium EDTA is a chelating agent. So chelating agents bind with metal ions because as we are formulating, we are using iron utensils. We have iron bowls, we have whisks and other things that have iron. So even if we are using deionized water, we still need to use a chelating agent that will help to bind any traces of metal ions in our formula, and it will help the formula to stay good for longer. It also boosts the activity of your preservative. Here we have our fragrance. We are going to be using like a mixture of fragrances, right? So the fragrance is just to bring for aesthetics, to make it smell nice, and you know, when you wash or you clean, you want to have that beautiful smell. So fragrance is actually optional. If you don't want fragrance, you can do without it. All you need to do is to add more water in place of the fragrance that you are using. So here we have our sodium hydroxide lye. So we are using this as a pH buffer. A pH buffer, we are using it because we are using LABSA, that's sulfonic acid. Just like the name implies, sulfonic acid is an acid. It is highly acidic. So we need something to balance out the pH, and that's why we're using sodium hydroxide lye. Next ingredient we are using is our soda ash sodium carbonate. It acts as a builder in the surfactant system. It also helps to cleanse, like remove dirt. It brings the cleansing power. It adds to the cleansing power of this surfactant. So the last time we made something like this, we used Liquid Gemal Plus as our preservative. However, Liquid Gemal Plus is quite expensive, so I like to use it just for the formulas I use directly on my body, like my body wash, like my face wash, like my lotions. You know, I find it like wasteful to use it in a cleaning product. So if you don't have anything against parabens. Lastly, even though it is not part of the formula as written, we have some citric acid. Now we are just keeping citric acid on hand in case we need to bring down the pH of our solution. So if we have a product at the end of the day that has a very high pH, we can always just add citric acid as needed to bring down the pH. So it is optional. It's really depending on how your formulation comes out at the end of the day. Finally, for this formula, this is the ingredient that makes the difference. You know those DIY liquid soaps you make and they turn out slimy, they are gummy and slippery, right? So the difference is this. We are going to be using as our thickener the normal salt. This is just normal table or cooking salt, not industrial salt, right? So the difference between this formula and that, the ones that are slippery, is that instead of salt as a thickener, they use gums, cellulose gums like HEC, like HEC, that's nitrosol, and HPMC and the rest of them. So those are actually very good thickeners, right? But they are better in products that you want extra moisture and sleep, like products you use on your body, and not for cleaning products. And salt is also an excellent thickener. I also use it to thicken some of my body washes if I am using surfactants that can be thickened with salt. You have to know that it's not all surfactants that can be thickened with salt, but all the surfactants we are using today, SLS, SLES, they can actually be thickened with salt. So I had to transfer my solution into a bigger container because the other container became too small for me to mix properly. So this is a bigger container. I just turned everything into it, and you can see how it looks now. Yeah, so everything I've added so far is dissolved, including the SLES and every other thing. So I stirred very well with this. However, if you have a smaller quantity and you have a hand mixer, a hand blender, you can actually use that. So now this is my SLS, which I soaked at the beginning of the video. So I stirred it very rigorously. That's why it has a lot of foam on it. It's actually dissolved completely, but I had to stir it very well with a whisk because I am trying to shoot this video, and once I'm done I have to shoot another video, so I don't have the time to wait. If you leave this for a few hours, since especially we used because I used hot water, it would melt, but I didn't have that time, so I stirred it very well and broke every lump. So I'm going to just add it straight up into my solution. So just stir lightly to incorporate it, being careful not to raise too much foam in it. So just stir lightly because we are still going to leave this till tomorrow. Yeah, so you can see the solution is becoming a bit more thick and is becoming clearer at the bottom. Yeah, so we're done with SLS. So next we are going to be adding our Cocamidopropyl betaine, capb 35%. That's the product. It's not like we're using 35% in the formula. The product itself has capb 35%. So the thing is, when you buy surfactants, when you buy your texapon, when you buy your SCI and other surfactants, there is actually a percentage, right? And knowing the percentage helps you to know how much of it to use in your formula. For example, the SLES I used is 85%. However, in the market there is SLES 30%. So if I say I'm using 10% of SLES 85% and you get the one of 30% and you use the same 10%, it is not going to give you the same result as what I use. So that's why in my videos I label properly, so that when you are buying the product, you can ask any supplier that is worth their salt should know the percentage purity of everything they are selling to you, right? So let's get there. We are going to measure our Cocamidopropyl, buy it in gallons. Yeah, so I decant it to make it easier for me. I don't need to be carrying the gallons around since I make a lot of small sample products. So I need about 650 grams of this in this formula. So do you see the reason why it is important to measure your ingredients by weight instead of by volume? Now this is 650 grams of Cocamidopropyl betaine, and it is just around 600 ml, not even completely 600 ml on the measuring jug. So if I wanted to get 650 grams and I went to get 650 ml instead, it means I would have wasted this, or I would have added more than I intend to add. So that is why it is important to measure your items in weight. It gives you a more accurate idea of what you are using. So we're going to add our Cocamidopropyl betaine into the mixture, and then we just stir it lightly, not so much. Now cocoa betaine also increases the viscosity. What I mean is that it makes the solution to become thicker. I don't know if you can notice it from here, but the solution is already becoming thicker, and we have not added any thickener yet. We haven't added our salt. Our salt is going to be the very last ingredient we are adding, but you can see how thick this has become already from the addition of cocoa betaine. So cocoa betaine is very good. It brings mildness to this formula. Some people ask me if cocoa betaine is the same thing as foam booster. Well, I don't really know. It's better for you when you are buying your items from the market, just tell them you want Cocamidopropyl betaine instead of telling them you want foam booster, because some of the foam boosters they sell to you in the market are just melted SLS. They just melt SLS and add lobster to it, that's sulfonic acid, and that's how they make foam booster. Now if you make your formula like this, you wouldn't need any foam booster because we have already measured the amount of surfactants we need. So any formulation that needs you to add foam booster, it means it is not complete, right? So just get your formulation right once and for all, and you would not even need any foam booster. So cocoa betaine is not the same thing as the foam boosters you buy. Just buy your Cocamidopropyl betaine instead of going for foam booster. So this is how our solution is looking already. So the next surfactant we are adding is cdea. Now this cdea is acting as about 3 things. It is a non-ionic surfactant. It brings mildness to the formula. It also helps to mix our fragrance oil very well into the soap. Yes, everything we have used here can also solubilize your oil, but this is an effective solubilizer. It helps the fragrance to stay, to mix well into the soap and to stay mixed. I'm going to show you how it solubilizes oil into your fragrances. We're going to be using this rose themed fragrance and this blue water fragrance. Now, before you go ahead to mix fragrances, make sure that you already tried it and you like it, right? You may not like it, you may like it. So if you're not sure, if you have not tried it before and you don't want to risk it, just use one fragrance, okay? But myself, I have had these mixtures and I like it, so that's what I'm going to proceed to use. Okay, so if I had added this fragrance into water, it would just sit on top of the water, right? If I added the fragrance into just ordinary water, it would have sat on top of the water. It won't mix with the water because oil and water don't mix. And remember that our formula is mostly water. Over 50% of the formula is water. Okay, so that is why we need a solubilizer. Even though SLES is a very good solubilizer, but just to be extra sure that our fragrance is not going to separate. Sometimes you make your liquid soap and after a while you see your fragrance oil floating on top. So to be very sure, you can use something like this cdea, and there are other solubilizers that we'll be using in other formulas too. Just stay tuned to this channel and you will learn more about using these kinds of ingredients to mix water and oil together. So I still have some SLS lumps on my spatula, but I'm going to take care of that later. So we add this right into the mixture. Now, some fragrance oils thin out your soap, while some other fragrance oils make your soap to become very thick. So it just depends. Now, if you are using a new fragrance oil, that's a fragrance oil you have never used before, it is good to just take out a little of your soap into a small container and add the fragrance oil to it to see how it reacts. So you know if it's going to thin out your soap or not, and you would, make adequate plans to remedy it. So now we just have a few things left. We have to add our glycerin. Yeah, I think we have to add our glycerin and our ethanol. That's all for the formula. So this is our vegetable glycerin. We're adding it so that it becomes, the formula is skin friendly. It won't dry out your hand or make your hand to be very dry and painful, so that's why we're adding glycerin to this. And then we're going to add our ethanol. Our ethanol, like I said before, it helps to disperse the fragrance into the mixture, and it helps the fragrance to reach every part, and then it also brings degreasing properties, just like I said. Very clear. Now I want to give you one tip. Even though this spoon is a spoon that can be used for eating, it is my formulation spoon. It never goes into my kitchen for any reason at all. So anything you are using, anything you see me using here, my jug, everything, I only use them for formulation. I do not use them. Don't say, oh, maybe I've washed it with water and soap. No, please don't use these for eating. So I have my SLS jar, my SLS container. I want to rinse it off because I want to make sure that this is a no waste formula. I want to get all my SLS out. So I'm rinsing it off. So I'm just using this solution to rinse out my remaining SLS. This is going to be a no waste. Raw materials are super expensive, so we cannot afford to waste anything at all. Okay, so that's done. So this is what our formula is looking like now. It's still quite thick, as you can see. It's thick. You can even decide to leave it like this without adding any thickener. However, I'm going to add salt as a thickener just to show you how to add salt. But if it's for my own purpose, this is okay for me. I really wouldn't have added any other thing, which I've dissolved in water. I want to use yellow coloring. I've already dissolved this in water for a while. You can decide to dissolve, you can decide to add like that. It actually all depends on you. So in we go. I don't want it to be very darkly colored because I find out that sometimes when I add the powder directly, it becomes very, very dark before I notice. So that's why I decided to dissolve it before I go ahead. Okay, so now we have to check the pH of the formula to know what the pH is before we go ahead to thicken it up. We need to check the pH before we thicken it up, because sometimes when you have already thickened it and you now have to adjust the pH, it can make it to become watery, right? You lose the viscosity. So anything you want to do, you want to put fragrance, you want to check pH, everything, you must do it last. The thing you are going to add last is your thickener, your salt. So I'm going to use the pH strips. I've taken a little of the soap, added it into some water, and I'm just going to check the pH. So the pH of this soap comes out at cooking salt. Anyone you are using to cook, you can just buy and store in a container for making your formulations. So we are going to measure our salt. We have to make sure we measure it accurately to avoid it thinning out the soap, because the funny thing with salt is that the more of it you add, you could thin out the soap instead of thickening it. Our salt, we have to measure it precisely. If not, it will become thin. So this is the amount of salt we are adding. By the time we add it, if it is not enough, we can increase it bit by bit. I'm going to put the exact measurements in the description box, so ensure that you read up so that you don't get the opposite of what you are expecting. So I'm not adding all the salt at once. I'll add it gradually instead. So you can see how it starts changing viscosity immediately. So this is it. We have to cover this and leave it to see how it goes till the next day. It's going to get thicker as it stays on because we didn't dissolve the salt, okay? So we will not see the result immediately. So this is our solution the next day, and we just do a lather test. I used 5 milliliters in 1.5 liters of water. Yeah, so I initially added 2.5 milliliters and I added the remaining 2.5, and this is the lather that you get.